A New York Times investigation into the Uvalde school massacre has exposed new details on law enforcement's response. Some injured victims inside the school had to wait more than an hour to get help as officers stood by outside. According to the Times, police were waiting for protective equipment as the chief on the scene was afraid of risking officers' lives. Republican Congressman Tony Gonzales, who represents the city of Uvalde, is joining us now to talk about all this. Thank you so much for being with us this morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Vlad.
So let me get your thoughts on this new footage showing that it took law enforcement 77 minutes to breach the classrooms and stop the gunman. Of course, the question that a lot of the parents and families in Uvalde are asking, could lives have been saved during those minutes?
Yeah, many of us are looking back to see what could have been different. And I know these law enforcement officers personally. I've spoken with them before. I've spoken with them afterwards. Many of them have, in some cases, their own children were in that room, or their cousin or a relative or a neighbor. So everything I've been told is minutes, literally 3 minutes after the gunman entered, he was engaged. As far as what was the delay was it was a steel door. It was locked. They did not have the tool in order to open it, if you will, either forcefully or the keys, and it took them that long to find the keys to get in there. One of the stories that isn't making it out, that officer, Lieutenant Javier Martinez, that first engaged that gunman, he was there, he entered the room, when they breached, and then afterwards, there was all these copycat threats. So here he went through this whole ordeal, and he goes down to the Uvalde High School to make sure that the high school was protected. Border Patrol went to elementary schools and other things too. There's a lot of things we need to learn from this, but I will say there were a lot of heroic people that day as well.
So I want to ask you about gun legislation. You voted no on the Democrats' Protecting Your Kids Act. It includes raising the age to purchase semi-automatic rifles from 18 to 21. I see on your Twitter feed that you posted, listen, I represent the people of Texas, and the people of Texas don't want more restrictions. But I'm going to point out a poll to you from the Texas Politics Project. They've been polling Texans for a really long time, and they asked about whether or not stricter gun laws should be enacted. 44% said yes. So a huge chunk of the people you represent said yes. Why don't you support this proposal?
Yeah, I oppose any legislation that infringes upon responsible gun owners, period. This piece of legislation did not tackle the issue. There were Democrats that voted against this piece of legislation. So and it had 0% chance of passing. I've taken a different approach. I'm looking at, hey, let's look at mental health. Let's look at strengthening our schools. Let's bring every idea to the table, but let's have a discussion on it, and all of the above discussion. So what am I for? I'm for grants. I think in particular mental health grants, these community clinics. These community clinics are very important, especially in rural communities. Telemedicine, that's an area that we need to expand on. You've got Stop School Violence grants that work. There are programs that are already in place, the COPS program. These are some things that are already in place that I think we just need to expand upon, not to mention legislation like the Eagles Act and the Luke and Alex Act, I think, are bipartisan areas that we should focus on.
I think all those things are good, but when we look at the case in Uvalde, more mental health intervention wouldn't have helped in this case. This is not a guy who was on the radar. You talk about a lot of these policies are already in place. Yes, they are already in place, and they didn't work.
It's a great point. I mean, the truth is this gunman should have never been able to purchase a weapon. Not because he was 18, but because he was mentally unstable. This is where we need to look at, hey, how do we get extensive background checks to find out, these juvenile records? This person had a very long history of mental health illness. And he didn't just wake up that day and decide to murder innocent people. This is part of the solutions. I was speaking to a colleague of mine, Garrett Graves, the other day, and he goes, hey, Tony, why are all the gunmen always men? Why aren't we researching why that's the case? So I think that's an opportunity. Let's put some dollars into researching why aren't women shooting up schools? And what is the difference there?
Can I ask you, Congressman, because I know you got to run, but what is the difference? I mean, every other country in the world has mental health issues. Every other country in the world has violent criminals. Every other country in the world has access to video games and movies. Every other country in the world is seeing fewer folks going to churches, synagogues, and mosques. But what would you say is the one differentiating factor between the lack of gun violence in those countries and in ours?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a hard question to
Is
answer.
it?
I think that's
It
what
is?
everybody should be asking, is to go, hey, let's focus on that. I think what I don't want to do is I don't want to infringe upon responsible gun owners. Look, my grandfather taught me how to handle a weapon as a child. You know, I joined the Navy at 18 years old. I'm 20 years old. I'm in Afghanistan handling a weapon daily. A lot of that is training. I think this is another area that we can incorporate it. But I go back to mental health. I mean, beyond the school shootings and the violence, I would argue there is a rising crisis in America in regards to mental health, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety. COVID certainly didn't help. So I don't think we can go wrong if we decide to expand the mental health area. And I also think we can save lives. If we would identify this person had problems as a juvenile, I guarantee you no one would have wanted to sell that person a firearm. That's what we need to get preventive, not reactive.
All right, Congressman Tony Gonzales, thank you.
Thank you.